What's up, hungry people? Today we're eating poutine. Today we're at Lake Louise. Today we're eating Beavertails. Today we're trying authentic maple syrup. Today we're flying the waterfalls. Today we're hanging out in Banff National Park in Alberta, Canada. Oh, Canada, our home and native land, unless you're an American, in which case you're just another tourist.
What do I believe? What makes me feel it to write you this song?
My fiance and I decided to take a trip up to Canada for a little bit of fresh air and relaxation. After a little bit of Reddit research, I came to the conclusion that the best place to visit in Canada was Banff National Park. So you know what? We did it, Reddit. We went to the most photographed lake in the world. Fast forward to 3 months later, where we hopped onto a plane and headed off to the land of maple syrup. We flew into Calgary, where we immediately sought out the closest Tim Hortons to initiate our adventure into the Great White North. To further infiltrate Canadian culture, we stopped off for lobster poutine at Briggs in Calgary. This would be the first of my daily poutine intake in Canada, which would henceforth be a daily occurrence. From Calgary, we rented a car and drove to Canmore, where we stayed in an Airbnb. Unfortunately, the fog prevented us from seeing the spectacular views of the mountains that we were promised had it been a sunny day. Canmore is located just outside of Banff National Park and is home to many interesting bars and restaurants. The best part about staying in a touristy area is the variety of food. In fact, our first meal in Canmore couldn't be less Canadian. Though there is something about eating ramen with a mountain view that makes the experience that much more memorable. If there's one thing to know about Canada, it is that they are serious about their bears. We saw more than one sign for bear spray for sale, but we didn't actually think we would, see any bears. Our first day at Lake Louise was super cloudy, so we decided to take a short hike up to the nearby trails. Along the way, we kept seeing tracks in the snow. Dog or mountain lion? Let me know what you think they are down in the comments below. On our way back down the trail, we looked to our left and saw this. We were literally so close to this mama grizzly and her cub that you can literally hear the plants they are eating being ripped out of the ground. Fortunately, a fellow photographer waved us down so we could squeeze by the bears and down to safety. Don't worry, I filmed all of the footage of the bears from the lower trail where other tourists had gathered to take pictures. The next day, the bears were still in the same spot, but Lake Louise had closed the trail to tourists. We had likely walked within meters? Whatever Canadians use. We had literally walked so close to a mother and baby bear without even knowing it, an experience that is both exhilarating and also terrifying. From there, we decided it was too cloudy to properly enjoy the view, so we went back down to the town of Banff to eat some breakfast since we had been up since 4 a.m. Fortunately for us, Coyote's Southwestern Grill was one of the few places open at 7:30 a.m., and their breakfast is absolutely delicious. I had smoked salmon, eggs Benedict, and pancakes for breakfast. I'm not above ordering 2 entrees while we're on vacation, especially when Canadian maple syrup is involved. After breakfast, we figured it was too late to beat the crowds back to Lake Louise, so we opted to head up to the Sulphur Mountain gondola and hot springs instead. The weather cleared up as we came to the summit, and we were treated with some of the best mountaintop views in Banff. We made our way to the Sky Bistro on the summit of Sulphur Mountain, where we perfectly timed our dinner to the clouds rolling back in. If we had arrived 15 minutes later than we did, we definitely would have missed the clearest views. After lunch, we took the scariest gondola ride back down the mountain.
Oh. Man.
Oh my god.
Okay, that's not as bad as I thought. Coming over that was going to be intense.
I'm not usually scared of heights, but something about this gondola ride really made me queasy. To soak away our dizziness, we headed down to the hot springs at the foot of the mountain to enjoy a quick soak in the municipally sourced hot waters. Yeah, apparently the springs are too low this season to source the hot pools alone. But we didn't really mind at a balmy 38 degrees Celsius. The water still felt great. After our soak, we headed back to Canmore to dine on poutine and duck nuts. Whatever those are. Who would I be if I didn't take every opportunity available to eat the poutine in Canada, so I picked the Montreal smoked meat and truffle oil poutine. This is the second plate of poutine I've had in less than 24 hours, and it was worth it. The next morning, we took another early morning ride to Morraine Lake to beat the crowds. Not only was I able to get some magnificent shots of the sunrise, but we practically had the rock pile to ourselves when we arrived. Pictures truly cannot capture the beauty of this lake, which is naturally blue due to the Rocky Mountain sediments. After Morraine Lake, we crisscrossed the mountain over to Lake Louise, where we were able to walk the entire length of the lake almost in complete solitude. The water was as still as glass and electric blue. We barely encountered another soul until we began our trek back, where literal busloads of people were being dropped off at the shores of Lake Louise. If you aren't at Lake Louise by 7 a.m., you're too late. After that, the place is swarming with tourists and the lake is dotted with canoes. If you want the idyllic, picturesque Lake Louise you see on Reddit, you gotta beat the crowds. We got up at 4 and 5 a.m. every day despite it being vacation, and honestly, that's the best way to really sink into the natural beauty of Lake Louise without the chatter of tourists. After a successful trip to Lake Louise, we stopped at Bill Peyto's cafe. At this point, it's still only 9 or 10 a.m. for us, so we smashed on breakfast after walking up an appetite. It's not much, but it's an honest breakfast that hit the spot. We decided to drive back to Canmore for a quick power nap and some afternoon shopping. Between Banff and Canmore, there's more candy and maple syrup than you can shake a stick at. Not that I'm complaining. I did find this really cool maple syrup that I was super excited to bring home, only to remember after spending 20 Canadian dollars on it that I wouldn't be able to get the syrup back through customs, so I had to pour it out. $20 in maple syrup. Down the drain. Later that night, we went to the Grizzly house for a 3-course fondue dinner, complete with alcoholic smoothies. And yes, I'm aware that I flew over 2,000 miles to essentially cook my own dinner. My dinner included a simple tortellini soup to start, and some extra garlic bread and cheese fondue as the first course. I forget exactly what kind of cheese it was, but it had some sort of wine mixed into it, so it had a really sharp, funky taste that was absolutely awesome with the roasted garlic. Was followed by a 600-degree hot stone with garlic herb butter and a variety of meats to sear and oil fry. We ordered the special, which included Alberta beef, venison, and wild boar. We also ordered a seafood platter that included shrimp, scallops, and lobster. Of course, any fondue experience isn't complete without a variety of dips to choose from that you'll instantly forget which each one is the second that the waitress walks away. Either way, they were all delicious. Finally, the last course was a platter of fresh fruit and what I believe were some kind of crispy maple cookies paired with melted chocolate. Finally, the last course was a platter of fresh fruit and what I believe were some kind of crispy maple cookies paired with melted chocolate. The only disappointing aspect of this part of the meal was that the chocolate wasn't very warm, but it was still pretty delicious.
It's so hot though.
Who cares? Burn the shit out of your mouth. Hot?
It's not hot at all. After dinner, we moseyed on back to our Airbnb. And if anybody else has ever stayed at the lodges at Canmore, can you please explain why there are so many freaking rabbits everywhere? Like straight up pet store looking bunnies, but wild. What the f is going on in Canmore? The next morning, we woke up and stopped at the Rocky Mountain Bagel for an early morning breakfast. Per my usual order, I had a smoked salmon and mozzarella bagel with eggs and a smocha and black bottom muffin on the side. At this point in the trip, we had walked about 30-some miles, so I needed some sustenance to get us through the last leg of our journey. We hit up Johnston Canyon by 8 a.m., which has some of the prettiest views of rushing crystal clear rivers, roaring waterfalls, and stunning rock formations. After Johnston Canyon, we took a quick detour to Lake Minnewanka for a quick stroll along the rocky shores. From there, we headed back to Banff for a quick bite to eat. Beavertails are apparently a Canadian delicacy, or at least the 3 locations spread between Banff and Canmore would make you think. The tail part is actually a bit of fried dough that is dressed to your order. The sweet beavertails are usually dusted with cinnamon sugar and then topped with an assortment of candy bits. Since I decided to have dessert for lunch, my beavertail was covered with vanilla cream, crushed Oreos, and a chocolate drizzle. My fiance decided to get the adventurously named Peyto, which honestly, for a cheap load of poutine on top of a savory beavertail base, was some of the best poutine we had in Banff. I feel like poutine is kind of like pizza. Even when it's a bad pizza, it's still pretty good pizza. Sometimes the cheap stuff is the most delicious. We just weren't totally sure what the best way was to eat it. After more window shopping and buying some maple syrup that wouldn't be confiscated by the TSA, we headed back to Canmore for dinner at Gray's Food and Drink. Once again, poutine was at the top of the menu. This time, I opted for a classic version consisting of frites, cheese curds, and a generous pour of gravy. That's really good though. Now, my love for poutine is only second to my love for Indian food. So for my main course, I had this delicious buttered chicken. I'd definitely be remiss if I didn't have poutine for my first and last meal in Canada. So for breakfast on our last day, we stopped at Chez Francois for some of the best breakfast poutine I had ever had. Sure, it might have been my first time having poutine for breakfast, but it's certainly a poutine dish I'll never forget. Talk about some beautiful yolk pour and cheese pull action from this poutine. It's almost as beautiful as the mountains. For those of you keeping track at home, this poutine is dish number 5. Our trip to Banff National Park was absolutely beautiful. Between the scenery and the food, it's impossible to have a bad time. We went very early in the season. The lakes typically thaw between the last week of May and the first weeks of June. So we lucked out that not only were both lakes completely thawed the first week of June, they also put on a dazzling display of all of their natural glory. I cannot even begin to imagine how beautiful the lakes are when they are at their full color in the late fall. I do recommend if you take a trip to Banff to plan to wake up early to beat the crowds. 5 a.m. may sound early, but until you watch the sunrise over snow-capped mountains reflected in a glassy turquoise lake, you won't truly understand the absolute majesty of this picturesque place. Have you ever been to Banff? What was your favorite part? And where in the world should I explore next? Let me know down in the comments below. If you liked this video, consider checking out the Teespring link in the description to buy some Starving Chef merch. Every little bit of your support helps a small creator achieve her dreams. If you're still hungry, don't forget to flip that sub button and ring the dinner bell to be notified of my latest recipes and foodie adventures that I post every week. As always, if you want to know more about my trip or if you're on the hunt for some delicious recipes, head on over to thestarvingchefblog.com for even more goodness. I hope you all enjoyed.